think this one is kind of an unsung hero nutrient. We don't talk about it a lot, but it's so important for baby's brain development. And it's not in most prenatals yet, so food sources include.
Welcome back to the Exam Room Nutrition Podcast, your guide to giving better nutrition advice. I'm Colleen Sloan, a PA, dietitian, and today we're talking all things pregnancy nutrition with women's health dietitian Jane Leverich. In today's episode, you'll learn exactly what to talk about to set mom and baby up for success, from how much weight gain is normal, and why prenatals really are still essential. Yes, even folic acid. We'll highlight 5 nutrients that you should prioritize, food safety tips, and why nutrition is still really important postpartum. But first, let's check in with the exam room hotline.
My son is 3 and is a very picky eater, so sometimes I'm afraid that him surviving on strictly mac and cheese and chicken nuggets isn't cutting it nutritionally. What can I do?
Oh, I love this question. This is such a common concern, and I deal with this almost every day as a pediatric PA. And so the first thing that I would say to this mom, if she was sitting across from me in the exam room, is I would tell her that she is doing nothing wrong. I would tell her that she's a great mom and that feeding kids at this stage can be really tough. And it makes sense that she's worried that he's not getting everything he needs. That's the kind of reassurance moms in this season really need. We need to make sure that mom knows that her feelings and concerns are valid. Because although as a clinician, I know that picky eating at this age is usually age and developmentally appropriate, but the worst thing that you can do as a clinician is dismiss her concerns and invalidate them by just brushing it off and saying, oh, don't worry, this is normal. He'll grow out of it. So if you learn nothing else from this segment, I would highly encourage you to start by giving your patient some reassurance and letting them know that they're seen, heard, and valued. But then also provide her with some tools that she can actually use. Another thing that I like to remind parents is that our long-term goal isn't just to get this toddler to eat his broccoli. It's to raise a young adult who has a healthy relationship with food and their body. That's why I never recommend forcing, bribing, or punishing a child around food. And here's another thing to consider as well. A lot of the kid-friendly foods and the foods that they rely on, like chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, are actually fortified. Nuggets do provide some protein and iron, and boxed mac and cheese is fortified with calcium, iron, and even potassium. So even if the child's menu feels limited, they're often still getting important nutrients. Now, for extreme picky eaters, these are kids who avoid entire food groups or eat fewer than 20 foods. I do often suggest adding a daily multivitamin. Now, in this short segment, I don't have the time to go into the nuance of that, but definitely scroll back into the archives of the podcast because I've covered picky eating in detail on several other episodes. Now, a few other important things before you just jump into giving this patient some recommendations is to make sure that you check their growth chart, make sure there aren't any significant changes to their growth trajectory. Now, a little caveat here is just because the child in this stage is growing and their weight is normal, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting variety and meeting all of their micronutrient needs. So I also might consider doing some labs, especially to check for iron. Now, that being said, one of the most helpful frameworks here is to teach the parents the division of responsibility. This is where we define what the feeding roles are. So the parent's job is to decide what, when, and where meals are offered. The child's job is to decide if they'll eat and how much. Now, this can feel very scary for the parents because they're essentially relinquishing some sense of control. But this framework is a very effective strategy. Now, within that, it really helps to always include a safe food on their plate, something that your child reliably eats so they feel secure coming to the table when you are trying to introduce them to new foods. Now, going back to her original question, she said she's concerned that he's not getting everything he needs. What she means is that she's concerned about the lack of variety in his diet. And unfortunately, variety takes time. We cannot force a child to eat something that they think looks disgusting or that they're scared of. So when introducing new foods, I always suggest starting with a teeny, tiny portion of that new food without pressure. You can absolutely talk about it. Ask him what color it is, if he thinks it's squishy, soft, crunchy, but don't pressure him to taste it or try it. Also, let the child see the family enjoying that new food. And lastly, take the pressure off the dinner table. I always encourage food play, and you can have the child squish the new food and finger paint with it. Involve the child in the kitchen by washing the produce. They can shred lettuce for a salad and even bring food into play with their toys. So you can feed the dinosaur a green bean or allow the child to stack beans in his tractor. These exposures build comfort and over time, openness to trying a new food. I would remind this mama that feeding our kids is a long game and requires a ton of patience and consistency. But every little positive interaction nudges them to having a better relationship with food. I hope this helps, and you've got this, mama. Now, if you have a question that you'd like me to answer, just go to examroomnutritionpodcast.com, look on the right-hand side of the website for a black button that says, Send me a message. Click there and you can record your question, and I just might feature it on an upcoming episode. All right, well, get comfy or drive safe and enjoy my conversation with Jane. Jane, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Colleen. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today.
I love this topic. So I was really happy that we connected and you wanted to come in and talk about pregnancy nutrition. So one of the very, very common things I hear when people are pregnant is that they are eating for two. And so I'm curious if this is actually true. And then how many additional calories do women really need?
So I love that you ask this question. I feel it comes up a lot with clients I work with, but even just friends I have, I'm always hearing like, oh, I'm eating for two, gonna grab that extra piece of cake. It's almost kind of like a defense mechanism, kind of defending whatever you're eating while you're pregnant. And while the concept isn't like a bad concept, it's usually just misinterpreted. So eating for two kind of implies that pregnant women need double the quantity of food that you would eat when you're not pregnant. And that's just not really the case. Your body does need some extra energy to grow a healthy baby, but you definitely don't need two portion sizes of everything you're eating. So just a quick overview of kind of what's recommended. During the first trimester, most women don't actually need any extra calories. It's the second and third trimester, which is when the majority of the fetal growth is happening. That's usually when caloric needs increase. So what's recommended is about 300 to 400 extra calories per day during the second and third trimesters, which really only equates to like one extra balanced snack throughout the day, or just adding on a bit to your 3 meals throughout the day. So it's not so many extra calories that is contributing to this like eating for two sort of saying. So while it's sort of common thing that people say, it's definitely not warranted.
Yeah, it's kind of like a joke, people will say it to pregnant people and then just in passing, it's like, oh, you're eating for two, going for that extra piece of cake or whatever. And so I think it's really helpful to know like your calories don't really increase that much except for the second and third trimester. I think that's a great thing that we can educate our patients. And that brings me nicely to my next question, which is about weight gain during pregnancy. And this can be a really sensitive topic. I mean, weight in general is a very personal topic to discuss. And so can we talk about some of the recommended ranges for weight gain? And then how do we help our patients understand like where that weight actually goes? Because I know a lot of women struggle with seeing that number on the scale go up, and that makes them really, really nervous.
Yeah. So every pregnancy and every woman is unique. It's going to be different for everyone. So what we were just talking about with the increased caloric needs, that will look different for every pregnancy, right? And the same thing goes for weight gain during pregnancy. So there's a wide range of what's considered like normal and healthy when it comes to weight gain in terms of pregnancy. So it's hard to give a definitive recommended range. There are numbers out there that the Institute of Medicine does suggest for women to set as goals during pregnancy for their weight gain. And those numbers are based on your pre-pregnancy weight. I kind of hate giving women those numbers just because during pregnancy, there's so many other things going on in your mind that I think it's almost detrimental to tell a woman, okay, this is the amount of weight that you should gain. And if she gains more than that, or if she gains a little less than that, it can just cause a lot of unneeded stress. A lot of times, I don't find that to be super helpful. I know it's difficult for some women to put on that extra weight, but actually knowing where the weight goes, I think is super helpful. I like to remind clients of that often just because it's not all going to your thighs or your belly or wherever you think it's going. It's actually helping your body prepare itself to be the most safe and comfortable home for your growing baby. So just a few things I always point out to patients are that your actual baby is going to add about 6 to 8 pounds to your body weight. Your placenta is going to add about 1 to 2 pounds to your body weight. Your uterus expands as well. So that's another 1 to 2 pounds. Your breasts also about 2 pounds. They're preparing to be able to breastfeed and nourish your baby. So that weight gain is actually super important and necessary for the health and the safety of your baby.
And also, we have to remember that pregnant women may already have pre-existing health conditions as well that you are needing to manage at the same time during a pregnancy. So one that actually came up previously on the podcast, actually 2 years ago, was episode 22. It's called Journey Through Pregnancy with Type 1 Diabetes. And it was a really fascinating conversation on how do we manage blood sugar levels for our patients with type 1 diabetes throughout their pregnancy. So it was just a really cool look into how other medical conditions can either complicate or just make pregnancy even more complex. So if you're interested in that conversation, I'll link to episode 22 down in the show notes. You can take a listen to that after this one. Okay, I want to talk about prenatal vitamins. And it's so commonly with really any vitamins, but prenatals patients will often say that their pee is yellow, like what's going on? So if you can explain that and break that down so we can answer our patients if they're asking like, why is my pee yellow? Is this good? Is this bad? Like, does this mean I'm just peeing out all the vitamins? And then I would love your thought on the role of prenatals. And now a quick word from our sponsor, Cozy Earth Sheets. Now, fun fact, I share my bed with two 60-pound dogs. Add in the South Florida heat, and most nights feel like a sauna session. But Cozy Earth's bamboo sheets completely change that. After a long day in clinic or podcast recording, sliding into bed feels like the best part of my day. They're soft, cool, and somehow, even with two furry heaters snuggled up next to me, I actually stay comfortable all night. So if you're like me and you've been struggling to get good sleep, do yourself a favor and check out Cozy Earth. Head to CozyEarth.com and use my code EXAM for 40% off. And you can thank me later. All right, now back to the episode.
Totally. I love that you asked this question because this actually comes up a lot more than I ever kind of anticipated that it would. But I guess it is a little off-putting. And I always reassure them that it's completely normal. So this happens because prenatal vitamins contain water-soluble B vitamins, and riboflavin, one of the B vitamins, B2, and when it's excreted, it turns your pee this kind of bright yellow color, but it doesn't mean that your body is not getting the vitamins it needs. It just means that your body has absorbed whatever amount of riboflavin or other B vitamins that it needed from the prenatal, and then your body's doing its job by excreting the rest of it through your urine. So totally normal. And as for the role of prenatals, I like to think of them as not a replacement of a balanced diet. A balanced, nourishing diet is still going to be so important when you're pregnant, but a prenatal is really important to fill in those gaps during this time just because your nutrient needs are a lot higher. So they're high for yourself, for building up your own nutrient reserves, and they're also higher because your baby will take a lot of your nutrient reserves, right? So nutrients like folic acid, iron, vitamin D, choline, they're really important for supporting a healthy pregnancy and the baby's development. And the prenatal vitamin piece of it kind of just gives women a peace of mind that even if they're not eating perfectly every single day, they're getting the nutrients that they need. And I'm sure you know, and a lot of people know that it's hard for women who are pregnant to eat perfectly throughout the day, right? They're kind of battling a lot of different things. So nausea, vomiting are common, food aversions. So it's hard sometimes, and especially through different stages of pregnancy, for women to eat that healthy, balanced diet that I'm sure a lot of them strive for. Sometimes you just have to eat what you can keep down that day. So prenatals are great for just reminding yourself that you are getting the nutrients that you and your baby need for a healthy pregnancy and the healthy growth of your baby as well.
Yeah, they absolutely fill that gap because you said, pregnant women sometimes strive for perfection, but don't always meet all of their nutrients. I would say as a whole, all human beings, daily probably are not meeting all of their nutrient needs because nobody eats perfectly every single day, right? And so you mentioned something, and I wanted to go there, and you mentioned folic acid because there's a lot of chatter recently about folic acid, thanks to an influencer, of course, sharing a recent study that claimed that folic acid is linked to autism. Now I'll unpack that study probably in a later episode, but I would just love your ideas on how can we separate the misinformation from evidence, and how can we help our families know that folic acid is important. If they've maybe seen this video circling around, how do we encourage and discuss the importance and the need of folic acid supplementation during pregnancy?
I'm glad you brought this up because that type of misinformation is so frustrating to me and so frustrating to so many practitioners. And it's really hard because there are a lot of people online who get all of their information from influencers. They might not even know that it seems to be misinformation because these influencers seem like they're legit. They seem like they know what they're talking about. And it's just not the case if you look at the research. So you're right. There has been a lot of chatter about folic acid online right now and which sort of form of vitamin B9 folate, which form you should be taking while you're pregnant. And spoiler alert, before I sort of get into it, folic acid is what the research says is the safest, most effective way to prevent neural tube defects like spina bifida in babies. So folic acid is what's recommended by all evidence-based practitioners. And what I've been seeing a lot of chatter about is people deciding to take methylfolate versus folic acid. So methylfolate is the active form of folate versus folic acid, which is the synthetic form of folate. And when you take methylfolate, what people are saying is that your body doesn't need to convert it to the active form. People are saying that your body just absorbs the folate immediately versus folic acid, which is the synthetic form. It needs to be converted into the active form of folate in your body. So people think that methylfolate is more easily absorbed and is a safer, more effective option than folic acid. However, methylfolate has not been tested extensively like folic acid has, and it's a lot more expensive than folic acid as well. So I think people are just trying to find ways to make themselves seem like they're healthier. They've like done the extra research and figuring out what's more effective for them and their baby. But if you look at historical data, historical research, folic acid is what's recommended and what's safe for women and their babies. And it's such an essential nutrient during pregnancy and even prior to pregnancy and preventing these neural tube defects in babies. And so it's really harmful to hear these people online saying that women should not be taking folic acid because we don't want to see an uptick in neural tube defects in babies because women are being influenced by these other influencers out there. I think that was a long-winded answer, but
no, it was great. And I am so frustrated, and it's really upsetting seeing reels like this that just go absolutely viral, and moms take that to heart. And there is such a concern nowadays for the rise in autism that moms will do anything to prevent their baby from having autism. And yes, we haven't seen as many neural tube defects thanks to folic acid supplementation, right? The rates declined significantly once we started supplementing with folic acid. And so I've seen babies with spina bifida, and it's heartbreaking. And so I think this is a huge piece of education that you need to spend the extra time with your families. Even if they don't ask, you have to talk about prenatals and bring up folic acid. Maybe even ask them, what have you heard about this? Do you have any questions about this? How can I help you, work through maybe some of the information that you've heard? I would love to answer that and make sure that we can provide your baby all of the nutrients that they need so we can have a healthy, thriving baby. Okay, Jane, I want to move into some nutrients because this is, I think, a great talking piece for clinicians. So if you had to pick 5 nutrients that deserve the most attention during pregnancy, which ones are on your list and why?
Okay, so my top 5 may differ from another practitioner's top 5, but I'll give you my top 5 and just a little info about why. So One is folic acid, which we just spoke about at length. And I would love to see women start supplementing with folic acid prior to conception, just because it is so important in those first few weeks of pregnancy. And I think that's such a disconnect that women are just unaware that they should start supplementing with some of these nutrients before they even become pregnant. Folic acid supplementation is so important because a lot of people struggle to get enough folate for their diet only. So some foods that are high in folate are leafy green vegetables like spinach, or legumes like chickpeas. And then there's a lot of products that are fortified with folate. So things like orange juice, and a lot of grain products are fortified with folate. However, like I said, it's difficult to get enough folate to build up your nutrient stores through food alone. So that's why supplement is generally recommended. And I feel that most prenatals have folic acid in them, but when you are choosing your prenatal vitamin, definitely make sure that it has at least 400 micrograms of folic acid in it, preferably 600 to 800 micrograms. And then nutrient number 2 for me would be iron. So when you're pregnant, your blood volume like nearly doubles. So that's another area where your body is kind of gaining the weight because your blood volume is doubling and so many different fluids in your body are building up to prepare for baby. So iron is super important in oxygen delivery to mom and baby, and just helps support the development of the baby as well. Deficiency can be linked to fatigue in the woman and even some postpartum symptoms that might be worse than they would have been if you had been fully sufficient in iron. Some food sources of iron that I recommend are animal-based protein sources. So chicken, red meat, things like that are going to be really high in iron, as well as some plant-based sources. So spinach has iron in it. Again, legumes have iron. So chickpeas, lentils are great sources of iron that are plant-based. Next would be vitamin D. So vitamin D is essential for bone health of the baby, but for mom, vitamin D is important for immune function. So we know that when women are pregnant, their immune systems are kind of lessened just to allow the baby to sort of take over. So women are more susceptible to infection when they're pregnant. So vitamin D is going to be important in helping prevent infection, and it helps in mood support as well. So common feelings of fatigue during pregnancy, yes, could just be from actually being pregnant, but could also be linked to a vitamin D deficiency. So I think vitamin D is super important. And a lot of women start their pregnancy already deficient in vitamin D. So some foods that you can find vitamin D in are fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, egg yolks have great amount of vitamin D. And then obviously your dairy products have vitamin D in there as well. Number 4 would be omega-3 fatty acids. So omega-3 fatty acids support brain development in the baby and have been shown in some studies to help reduce the risk of preterm birth. Most people don't get enough from food alone, so this is a great thing to look out for in your prenatal vitamin. Omega-3 fatty acids, especially DHA, which is a type of omega-3 fatty acid. But some foods that I do recommend, again, are fatty fish. So things like salmon, sardines, herring, those are great dietary sources of omega-3 fatty acids. And then last but not least, choline is my 5th nutrient that I like to tell women to focus on when they're pregnant. I think this one is kind of an unsung hero nutrient. We don't talk about it a lot, but it's so important for baby's brain development, and it's important for mom's brain function as well. It's not in most prenatals yet. So food sources include eggs, salmon, beans. In eggs, though, it is the egg yolk that contains choline. So if you're eating eggs throughout your pregnancy, that's great. Just make sure you're eating the whole egg to get the choline. And if you don't eat a lot of those foods, a separate supplement of choline is definitely key. I don't know why more prenatals don't include it. I hope that in the future years, people will start including it in their prenatal vitamins.
Okay, I love this list because this kind of gives us a really nice framework for just some patient education. And, during one of those first visits, or even like you had mentioned, if it's during family planning and the mom isn't pregnant quite yet, this is a great conversation to have. So, to recap those 5 nutrients, I heard you say folic acid, iron, vitamin D, omega 3s, and choline. And so those are 5 things that you can just talk about very quickly. It could be a 2 to 3 minute conversation of just some certain foods that they could start adding into their diet. Now, I want to move to the opposite end of the spectrum. Are there any things that we need to educate women about, like specific foods or food groups that pregnant women should avoid?
Yeah, this is a big question. So, if you've read up on prenatal nutrition at all, you'll probably run into lengthy lists of foods that women like, they're on the do not eat list, like avoid at all costs. So, things like soft cheeses, raw milk, certain seafood, undercooked meat, deli meat, eggs with runny yolks. Like, I could go on. There's so many foods that make this like do not eat list. And it's not bad advice. Like I mentioned before, during pregnancy, women's immune system makes adaptations to allow the baby to grow. So as a result, women are more susceptible to infection. And some of those infections include like foodborne illness or food poisoning, as it's more commonly known. And foodborne illness can cause serious pregnancy complications. So that's why these fairly strict prenatal nutrition guidelines around food have been developed. My top tips, I guess, when it comes to food safety include being smart about where you purchase perishable food from, cooking at home more often, just because you don't know how things are prepared at restaurants. Additionally, avoiding purchasing any pre-cut veggies or fruit. Oftentimes, microbes like to live on pre-cut veggies and fruit. So being mindful about that, cutting up your own produce, and then always separating raw and cooked foods when you are cooking yourself, and washing your hands often, especially when you're cooking, is going to be number one tip in avoiding foodborne illness. There are some foods that are food products, I guess, that I counsel women on avoiding completely or limiting significantly. So for avoidance completely, I recommend avoiding alcohol completely. I know that there are some women who feel that during the 3rd trimester, the baby's fully cooked and it's okay to have a glass of wine here or there. But our research says that no amount of alcohol is safe during pregnancy. So I recommend that all women completely avoid alcohol during pregnancy. But that's the only food item that I ever recommend completely avoiding. There are some that I recommend limiting. So things that I recommend limiting are caffeine, refined carbohydrates, trans fats, and sugar. And a lot of that has to do with just balancing blood glucose levels, not contributing to any sort of drastic spikes or drops in blood glucose, just because we know that that's not super helpful for anyone, but especially when you're pregnant.
I like your approach to how you really focusing on limiting certain foods, and safety is a huge one. If you speak about nothing else, it needs to be about food safety. And unfortunately, we are seeing the harms of the rise of drinking non-pasteurized raw milk lately, since that's become a new fad and like a new popular trendy thing to do. Unfortunately, women are contracting Campylobacter, and recently a woman in Florida had a miscarriage at, I think, week 20. That's so heartbreaking. And so if you can provide that education of food safety and ensuring that they are consuming food at the proper temperature, if they're drinking milk, it's pasteurized milk, to promote safety of not only mom, but also of that fetus. Okay, I have a few more questions, but we're going to kind of move towards postpartum and the importance of nutrition at that phase. And so what nutrients or eating patterns can support mom's healing and recovery after baby is here?
Great question. Postpartum nutrition is so important. I know there's a lot of other stuff going on during postpartum, in addition to just caring for your brand new baby, but focusing on your nutrition and foods that support healing and recovery for the woman herself are super important. And then also thinking about it as you are still technically growing your baby, especially if you're breastfeeding. We know that breastfeeding moms do need additional calories, even more calories than they needed while they were pregnant. And if you're not breastfeeding for whatever reason, which is totally fine, you still are going to have some increased caloric needs for at least the first month or two after giving birth because your body is healing. So foods that I like to recommend that support healing and recovery include things like soups made with bone broth. Soups are just comfort food, nice and warm, can be really nice and relaxing to eat if and when your baby decides to sleep for you for a little bit. And bone broth includes collagen, which is super important in just kind of helping your body heal and helping your tissues rebuild themselves after you've given birth. Also contains a lot of really great micronutrients. Other things that I like to recommend are high iron foods. So we talked about this before as foods that are important during pregnancy, but high iron foods are important after pregnancy as well. Women do lose a significant amount of blood when they're giving birth, whether it's vaginal birth or a C-section birth. So repleting your iron stores is going to be super important. So like we talked about, animal-based sources of protein, as well as legumes, spinach for plant-based sources are going to be super important in recovery. And then anything that you might think of as a sort of balanced or healthy food to include in your meals are going to be important postpartum. So vegetables, fruits, they contain a lot of micronutrients that become depleted during pregnancy and giving birth. Whole wheat grains are going to be important. And then the last thing I like to recommend is foods rich in iodine. So things like dairy products or even seaweed are really important. Iodine, I feel, is another nutrient that often gets forgotten. And that probably would have been number 6 on my list of important nutrients for women who are pregnant if I had 6 nutrients to say.
Okay, I previously did an episode, it's episode 44 called Bounce Back Culture, the truth about postpartum nutrition. And it was a really, really awesome conversation that talked about the harms of thinking that, within 2 to 3 months, you're going to be back to your pre-pregnancy weight, back to working out 6 days a week in your CrossFit gym, and how that idea is so harmful for moms. And so that was just such a great conversation to kind of bring it back to reality and helping moms understand the healing process after delivery. And we dug deeper into some of those nutrients that can help with and during postpartum nutrition. So I'll link to that down in the show notes, but it's episode 44. If you want to learn more about postpartum nutrition, go check that out after this episode. Jane, this has been such a informative and helpful conversation, kind of how we should frame our discussions with our pregnant patients or those who are thinking about getting pregnant. So thank you so much for all of this information that you shared for us. If someone wants to hang out with you online, where should we send them?
Yeah, thanks so much, Colleen. This was so fun. If people want to hang out with me, you can find me on Instagram. So it's at Jane Lev Nutrition, or you can head to my website. It's pretty much the same thing, just www.janelevnutrition.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, for all of your pregnancy nutrition needs, go follow her. Her content is fantastic. And I will link to that down below in the show notes. But Jane, thank you so much for your time. Hope you have a great day.
Thanks so much. You too, Colleen.
Hey, well, thanks so much for being here today. I hope you found some value in today's conversation. If you did, take a quick screenshot of the podcast, post it to your stories, and tag me on Instagram at examroomnutrition, and let me know what your biggest takeaway was from this episode. All right, I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time.